Aloha, welcome to the OUM Admissions Information webinar. Kia ora to Donna and Georgia, Hayden and Jesse, Wanya to Joe and Joshua and Katie, bonjour Keisha, and Margarita and Nancy and Ramisa, to Lofalava, to Regina and Scott, to Alicia and Jennifer, to Lofa, to Jacob and Greg and Ashley and Ankit and Amanda. And to Lofalapa, to those of you who are joining us via recording, welcome to the OUM community and to the OUM Admissions Information webinar. For our agenda today, Ms. Shanda Gordon and I are going to do some introductions and an OUM overview. Then I'll pass the floor over to Ms. Shanda to talk about the admissions requirements and admissions process and interviews. I'll speak about the OUM curriculum, the OUM student ambassadors, and other OUM student supports. And then we will have a Q&A period and next steps. In order to support your participation and ensure Ms. Shanda and I are giving you all the information that you need, I'm going to launch a poll. And for those of you who've been a part of our webinar community for a little while, this is something new, but I thought we would give it a try today. So I'm going to launch the poll now. If you would please let us know what stage of admissions you're at. Are you planning to apply to OUM for July 2025? Are you planning to apply to OUM for the January 2026 intake? Or are you undecided? And I see some responses coming in, so the poll's working. Thank you very much. So I see a number of our attendees are planning to apply to OUM for the next intake, which is July 2025. And a smaller number have plans to apply for the January 2026 intake at OUM, and some are undecided. So we hope we can help all of you today support your information gathering and decision making. So thanks for submitting your answers to that poll. And here I can share the results. All right, so let's do some introductions and our OUM overview. I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Shanda Gordon for her to introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself. Please go ahead, Shanda.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Maguire, and welcome everyone. It's good to see you all here today. My name is Shanda, and I am the Admissions Counsellor for Australia, New Zealand and Samoa, and I'm located in Brisbane, Australia, and I look forward to assisting you all with your current or future applications to OUM.
Thanks so much, Shanda. Great to see you again. So Shanda and I live on opposite sides of the world, but we always have fun doing these admissions information sessions together. So I'm Associate Professor Nicolette Maguire. I am OUM's Associate Dean for Student Engagement, and I have the extreme pleasure of working with students from the prospective student stage, which is where you're all at right now, to new students, to our preclinical and clinical students, and then when you have your graduates who become OUM alumni. So I get to see everyone through their entire medical school journey, which gives me quite a lot of satisfaction in having that role. If you would like to introduce yourself, let us know your name and where you're from. Feel free to type that into the chat window. So in terms of our overview for OUM, hopefully you've had a chance to visit our website and perhaps even speak with our admissions counselors to get some more information that is specific to you. If you haven't had a chance yet to speak to an admissions counselor to just have a better understanding of how things might work for you at OUM, I really do encourage you to fill out the form on our website to gain some more information and have a one-to-one with our very kind, well-informed, and personable admissions counselors like Ms. Gordon here. So in terms of our OUM overview, OUM is a really unique medical school because we offer a hybrid curriculum of really interactive online preclinical courses and then hands-on in-person clinical training. Oceania University of Medicine serves students in Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, in Canada, where I'm located, in Samoa, American Samoa, and the United States. We have faculty and staff across these locations. So Ms. Chanda works at our offices in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And I am in a place called Tiny, which is indeed a truly tiny rural location, a couple of hours north of Toronto, Ontario in Canada. And we serve students at the prospective student, the new student, the preclinical student, clinical student, and even alumni stages in all of those locations and beyond. You might have figured out that OUM is located in Apia, Samoa, and we have beautiful Samoa in our backgrounds today. And our university was founded with a mission to train doctors to support underserved patients in Samoa, in Oceania, and beyond. So all OUM students have this incredible opportunity to gain hands-on clinical experience during a rotation of their choosing at Tupua Tamasese Mea Ole Hospital, or TTM Hospital in Apia. And I'll tell you now, the most popular rotations there are the OBGYN due to the ability to participate in deliveries, and the psych rotation as well due to the hands-on teaching by our Dean for Samoa, American Samoa, and the Asia Pacific, who is a psychiatrist at the TTM hospital and also makes trips into community with medical students there. So whatever stage you're at, whether you are planning to apply for our July 2025 intake or our January 2026 intake, or you're undecided yet, we want to welcome you to the OUM community. And we look forward to sharing some further details and answering your questions today. You can ask your questions at any time throughout this session. We ask you to use the Q&A box to ask your questions. We will allow the session to flow. We'll try to answer the questions that are pertinent to whatever we're talking about at the moment, but you can go ahead and ask a question about anything, and we'll bring it up when we're on that subject or at the Q&A at the end. Also, if you would like to take the microphone and ask your question live, just indicate when you write your question in the Q&A box, I'd like to ask this live, and then we can call on you and get you the microphone. So I'm now going to turn the session over to my colleague, Ms. Chanda, to talk a little bit more about the admissions overview and requirements. Take it away, Ms. Chanda.
All right, will do. Okay, so today I'm going to be running through the entry requirements and the application process. So hopefully I cover all of your questions, but as Associate Professor Maguire said, please add your questions to the chat or the Q&A box. So the minimum entry requirements to be considered for entry into OUM are: you need to have completed at least a bachelor's degree with a GPA of 3 on the 4-point scale, 5.5 on the 7-point scale, or its equivalent. If your institution has used a different grading system, or your GPA is slightly below the requirement, I encourage you to contact the admissions office to discuss your case, because we can convert your GPAs and we can also provide advice if your GPA is slightly below the requirement. And if you've completed degrees above a bachelor's degree, that's wonderful. We want to see all of your tertiary studies in your application. And although it isn't a requirement, completing some science subjects such as biology, biochemistry, anatomy, physiology, etc., will help to strengthen your application. We also require English language proficiency. So if English is your second language, but you have studied at an English-speaking institution, you should meet the requirements. But if you're unsure, you can contact the admissions office or your admissions counsellor, and we can advise if you meet the requirements or if you need to sit an exam. At OUM, we don't require GAMSAT or MCAT scores for entry, which is a plus. It's also important to note that we only accept applicants who are residents and are citizens or permanent residents of the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Samoa, including American Samoa. And we will be requesting evidence of that citizenship or permanent residency as part of your application. So if you aren't a citizen of those countries or a permanent resident of those countries, we won't be able to accept your application at this time. All right, next slide, please.
Ms. Shanda, there's a question
Yeah.
from our chat window. And also hi to Katie from Arkansas. This is her question. So she would like to know, is this based on just the bachelor's degree or all master's degree? And I believe she wrote this in about the second bullet regarding GPA.
Yep. So yes, we take a cumulative GPA from all of your studies, all of your tertiary studies. So if you've got a bachelor's degree, we just take that. If you've got higher than that, we take them all. So yeah, we do a cumulative GPA, and it has to be a GPA of 3 out of that cumulative GPA. Sorry, there were more parts to that question?
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Regina, I see that you have a question and would like to take the microphone. Could you just let us know in the Q&A if your question is about admission requirements? And if so, I'll open the mic to you. And I also wanted to say hi to Jessie, who has introduced themselves. They're from Perth, Australia, currently a registered paramedic in the mining industry and looking to start the MD program while working, and looking forward to getting started and learning more. So hi, Jessie. Okay, Joe also has a question about the admissions requirements and wanted to know, what's the deciding factor for admission if you meet all the minimum criteria?
Okay, so we assess holistically. So we use a rubric and we assess your application. So if you meet all of the entry requirements, you should meet the entry points for the rubric, which means you then move on to the next stage. But I'll talk about that in the next one.
Perfect. Paul wants to know, does that work also if I have done a master's by research, given that my master's didn't have a GPA?
Yeah, if there's no GPA, there's not much we can do. So we will take the GPAs that we do have. But it will be on your application that you have done further studies. And the panel and the admissions counselors look at everything.
Okay, great. Before we move on to the next slide, I just want to say hi to Ashley, who's from Ontario, Canada, close to me maybe, and is been a paramedic for 13 years and is so ready for the application process. And also hi to Mesh from Canada, looking forward to joining OUM in July 2025. Hi, Ashley and Mesh, and thanks for your questions, Joe and Paul. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide, Ms. Shanda. You go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so it's really important that you get all of your questions answered. And as we've said many times, we encourage you to contact the admissions office. You can call us directly to or you can make an appointment, or you can email us and we'll help to answer all of your questions, because the OUM program is unique with our online curriculum and our fee structure, among other things. So it's just really important that you contact us to get all of your questions answered so that you're fully prepared for your application. Two of the biggest challenges that our applicants face is understanding the workload and the financial commitment. The MD program is a full-time program and it takes a huge time commitment. So we really need to make sure that you and your loved ones understand that commitment is there. And we also want to make sure that you understand the cost of the program. Can you afford it? As we are a Samoan institution, not all of our students, generally they're not eligible for government student loans. So you have to be able to pay for the program out of pocket. And how are you going to do that? So once you have all of your questions answered, you think you meet the requirements and you have your head around the time and financial commitments, we do encourage you to apply online. So to start your application, you go to the website and click on the Apply Now button in the top right corner. So we have 2 intakes per year, January and July, with the next one being July. The closing date for January is the 1st of September, and for July it is the 1st of March. So there is still time to apply for July now if you are still thinking about it. But if you are thinking about applying, I do encourage you to apply as soon as possible. Please don't leave it to the last minute, because we don't accept late or incomplete applications. So give yourself time to work on your application and make sure it's complete. For the application, we require certified or official transcripts and awards. And as I said, we require the transcripts for all of your previous studies. In the online application, there are instructions on how we want those transcripts sent to us because it's different for each region. We also require 3 letters of recommendation, and one of them has to be from a medical doctor. That's really important. We collect these letters on your behalf, so you enter your reference details onto the application form, and once you pay the application fee, we will contact your references directly to ask for their letters. And the email that we send to them will explain what we actually require from them. And then your references can upload the letters to your application directly, and you can check on their progress when you log into your online application. We also require a personal essay, and this is your chance to tell your story, explain why you want to be a doctor, why you want to study at OUM. There's no set word count or format that you have to follow, but I do encourage you to try and keep it to 2 pages because many people will read your essay and we don't want them reading forever. We also require a CV or resume. So you need to complete all of those requirements and then you submit your application online by the deadline to be considered for that intake. If you don't submit your application, you can't submit your application until you satisfy all the requirements. Once you start your application online, we do send reminders. So just please keep on top of your application progress and allow time to complete your application before the deadline. After the deadline, the admissions counsellors will assess all of the applications. So that's important to note that if you submit early, it doesn't matter. We don't assess until after the application deadline. But if you're eligible, you will proceed to a screening interview. If the screening interview, or the screening interview will be with an admissions counsellor, and in that interview, we will discuss your application, why you want to be a doctor, why you want to study at OUM. We will confirm your understanding of the program, and we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about the tuition, fees, rotations, and the time commitment required. If the screening interview goes well, you will then proceed to an interview with the admissions panel, and the panel will determine if you are eligible for admission. One of the great things about our interview process is that you should find out generally within a week, hopefully, after the panel interview, if you have been offered a place in the MD program at OUM. Unlike other medical schools, you don't have to wait for the entire cohort to be interviewed before you find out if you are successful. And then if you are accepted into the program, the admissions team will work with you to get all of your post-acceptance documents into us and the intake fee by the deadline, which for January is the 1st of December and for July it is the 1st of June. So that was a lot of talking from me. Again, if you have any questions, please contact the admissions office. We are a very friendly bunch and we are here to help you with any questions you have. And I'm also here to answer any questions you have right now. Thank you.
Speaking of questions, we do have a few. We'll start with the ones about bullet 2, understanding the financial commitment, because those came in first. So we'll try to tackle these together, Shanda, and also we can defer some to our next webinar on February 6th. So Regina let us know that her question is about the financial equipment. Sorry. My tongue is like not going as fast as my brain today. And she said she'd like to take the microphone to ask her question. So I'm going to enable that now for you, Regina, and then you'll be able to ask your question live. Just give me 1 second. And I'll enable that for you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. My name is Regina Yahweh. I'm a family nurse practitioner, at the same time a psychiatric nurse practitioner. My biggest concern is the tuition. How are students able to pay since, because you answered one of my questions about financial aid. So students just pay out of pocket? Is that how they pay their tuition for the program? And what is a rough estimate of the full program, like in dollars? Because I'm from Texas, so with accommodation and everything. And then if you can explain a little bit more about the hybrid, how does it work? Do we come over to the island, or where do we do our clinicals? Also, those are my questions.
Sure.
Thank
Which
you.
one would you like me to handle?
Well, why don't you start and then I'll take it from there.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, as I said in my talk just then, most students are not eligible for financial aid, so you will have to pay out of pocket. There are a few different options for payment. So you can pay up front if you happen to have that money available to you, and that will save you some of the CPI increase. But again, more information will be about this available in the financial webinar that's coming up in February. That you can also just pay as you go. So if you get an offer letter from us, on that offer letter, there will be an intake fee. I don't know the exact amount for US. I think it's above $9,000. For Australia, it's about $11,000. That fee has to be paid upfront by the deadline, which is for July the 1st of June. That pays for your first unit, which is general principles, and 2 of your research units. So the next option for payment is you pay as you go. So you paid your intake fee, then you wait until the next unit comes along and you pay for that, which will be cardiovascular. You pay for that unit, wait for the next one to come along and pay for that. The third option is to go on a payment plan. So you have to pay the intake fee upfront by the deadline. And then after that, you can opt to go on a payment plan where you pay a certain amount on the 1st of the month every month. And the bursar will figure out exactly how much that amount will be. The other questions were, I can't remember. Sorry.
I also wanted to know a little bit about the hybrid program, but I'll cover that when I talk about the curriculum overview. I just wanted to add to that, we do have some students who have financial qualify for financial aid. You said that you were in Texas, Regina. Right now, we don't have any US-based students that are receiving financial aid to attend the program. So the way that most of our US students do it is that they still continue with their existing work and they work around the program. So we do have a lot of nurse practitioners that are our US-based students who continue on with their practice during the preclinical period. And this works really well for a number of them because our live classes are in the evenings. And so they're able to work during the day and work out a study schedule that works for them in terms of their hours in clinic versus the times that they are needing to be in class and have examinations, etc. That's true for students in other areas as well. We do have students who are working during their degree. We have other students who work a high number of hours before they start. We do recommend that all students, when they first enter the program, that they take time off during the general principles, which is our first class, until they get a good understanding of the workload and then add their hours back in. So Regina, we do have some nurse practitioners who in the US who are currently in the program or who have just graduated from the program who could speak with you and provide a little bit more information if you wanted some more details. And that goes for other students that have a similar question. They won't be able to, our students and student ambassadors won't be able to tell you how you can pay for the program, but they can give you some information about how they and other students have done it. I also want to encourage Regina and others to attend our webinar on the 6th of February that is with our Chief Financial Officer and bursar who can answer really detailed questions about financing and the costs for the program. There's a couple of other questions about financials in the chat and Q&A, so I want to make sure we cover those as well. And Ashley wanted to know, are the clinical years the same amount of tuition as the didactic portion? So we have a tuition credit-based system. So each course has a certain number of credits associated with it, and each credit has a cost associated with it. So for example, some classes are 8 credits and other classes are 12 credits because they're longer classes. So you would purchase 12 credits for that class versus 8. So in terms of Ashley's question about the clinical years, the same amount as the didactic portion, there are fewer credits that need to be purchased during the clinical years, but sometimes there are hospital-based fees for rotations that are up to the hospital and not us, and other fees that may be associated with traveling. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I just want to make sure we're making sure to get any other financial questions. Let's see, Diane wants to know, can we pay using US financial aid FAFSA? Currently, we don't have any US students that qualify for FAFSA. And Nancy would like to know, can you get a Med credit line to pay for academic studies? Now, I'm not familiar with Med credit line. Are you, Ms. Shanda?
No, not at all.
So we will pass that question along to our CFO, Ms. Susie Robertson, and we'll ensure that she answers that at the next session. Okay, I think that's all for financial questions and admissions process. Let me just check the chat window and make sure.
Donna just wanted to know what month the interviews occur. I can answer that one.
Okay, please go ahead.
So usually after the closing deadline, so the 1st of March, we start assessing the applications. So interviews generally happen in end of March, April, and then all the panel interviews from April to May, early May. So that's when you should find out in late April or early May if you've been accepted into the program.
Thanks. I see that Mesh has asked what level of preparation is required for the interview.
You don't really need to prepare. We're just asking you questions that you should know, like, let's talk about your academic history. Let's talk about why you want to be a doctor. So there's really no preparation. Although with the panel interview, it is a proper interview. So we do ask you to come prepared, treat it like a proper interview, a job interview. And they'll just ask you questions like, how do you handle difficult situations? The typical interview style questions so that they can gauge if you are a suitable candidate for OUM.
So be yourself, that's her.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's our advice, because those interviews were really, I can say this because I'm one of the panelists on the interview, that we really want to get to know you and make sure that OUM is a good fit for you. So that's what I would say to prepare for. Prepare to be yourself at that. Okay. Okay.
Someone asking about credit. Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead, Shanda, if you found.
Yep. So we do not give credit for previous studies or work experience because it is usually a medical requirement or a medical board requirement that you have studied at least 4 years in medical school to go on with your licensure. So no, we don't issue credit for previous studies or work experience.
Okay, and Mesh wanted to know, are Canadian students eligible for financial aid? So we do have Canadian students who have qualified for their provincial, there I go again, their provincial financial aid. So the answer to that question is yes, but Canadian financial aid, as you know, if you're a Canadian student, is student specific rather than university specific. So I can't give an answer whether you specifically would qualify for financial aid, but we do have other Canadian students who are receiving financial aid to attend the program. Okay, I see there are some questions about placements and about the program, so we'll go ahead and talk about that now. And if you still have questions about the admissions process and interviews, you can just continue to ask those in the Q&A, and Shanda will answer them either through the chat portion, or we'll save them for the Q&A. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about the OUM curriculum, and this is great because Chikwu wanted to know what are the courses you do for the program. Paul wanted to know how many hours would you recommend working each week while you study, and how does that work on clinical placement? We provide clinical places for students. Chikwu is in Australia, and Kingsley wanted to know, how do we support OUM students with placements in an instance where students might not be able to find a place in their home country? And Chiba also asked, does OUM organize placements for students in Australia? So let's talk about that now. Okay, so the OUM curriculum is broken into 2/3 phases. So the first phase is called the preclinical phase. That's the phase you enter when you start medical school. So Once you submit your application and go through your interviews and you're accepted into the program, you get some information for pre-orientation. So we have meet and greets and more financial information and some study skills sessions. And then we have an orientation or O-week, which is a week long, and then you start your preclinical phase. So the preclinical phase is systems-based and is offered in an interactive online format. And it's also a hybrid format in and of itself. So you start in the preclinical phase with a course called General Principles. And this is an overview of some of the scientific principles and previous courses that you may have had that will prepare you to learn about the systems that come after the general principles. So you do things like cell biology, genetics, immunology, so on and so forth. After general principles, most students will start with the cardiovascular system, and then they will move on to the rest of the 10 systems. So you'll take a class on the cardiovascular system, where you will learn the embryology, anatomy, physiology, etiology of disease, diagnosis, treatment, management, epidemiology of disease, so on and so forth for the cardiovascular system. Then you move on to the urinary system, pulmonary system, endocrine system, heme immune, neurological system. I'm trying to go in order of when they're offered. Gastrointestinal system, musculoskeletal and tegumentary system, reproductive system, and I think I'm missing one. Shanda, are you gonna help me out here? I think I'm missing one. You go through 10 systems. At the end of your preclinical phase, you go into the clinical transition phase or clinical transition unit. So we have students who are on what we call our USMLE pathway. That is students who are planning to take the US medical licensure examination steps. And our standard phase, that is students who are not planning to take the USMLE steps. So all students in North America are on the USMLE pathway. That is, they will prepare and take the USMLE step 1 and step 2. Students who are in Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Samoa do not have to take the USMLE steps. However, their preclinical curriculum does prepare them for the USMLE Step 1, and the USMLE Step 1 preparatory course is offered free of charge. There's no additional credits to purchase for that course. So all students, if they think they may want to practice in the United States at any time in the future, are encouraged and eligible to take the USMLE steps. So that's part of the clinical transition unit for anyone on the USMLE pathway or anyone that would like to take the US.
Recording in progress.
Give me 1 second and I'll just make sure we can.
I just
Bit of background noise. There we go. All right. Also in the clinical transition unit is what we call our PCE, our preclinical exam. And it's an overview exam that has questions that are similar and the same to the questions that you would have received in your medical sciences. That is the cardiovascular system, urinary system, pulmonary system, endocrine system, so on and so forth. We give students about 4 weeks to study for their preclinical exam. It's a hurdle exam, but it's really not a big deal. Current students don't find it a big issue. It's a good overview of reviewing those concepts before they enter their CTU units. So the CTU units, there's CTU 1 and CTU 2. So those are preparatory for entering the clinical phase. So they include things like medical ethics and law, behavioral science, patient safety, empathetic communication, professionalism, all things that kind of prepare you to feel confident as you enter clinical rotations and allow you to practice safely once you enter your clinical rotations. So CTU 1 and CTU 2 are kind of the bread and butter of your transition phase, along with your USMLE Step 1, if you are part of the USMLE pathway or would like to take that exam. After that, you transition into the clinical phase. So these are your clinical rotations. So all OUM students take a set of core clinical rotations and a set of electives that are based on their interest. So the core clinical rotations include things like family and community medicine, psychiatry, internal medicine, emergency medicine, so on and so forth. During the clinical phase, students will choose which rotation they would like to take in Samoa at TTM Hospital. Students take at least 4 weeks of rotation at TTM Hospital, but they can take more than that if they wish. There were some questions in the webinar chat about, having clinical rotations in your country. So, and a lot of those were from students in Australia. So we do have rotations in states across Australia for Australian students to take their rotations within Australia. Does that mean you are guaranteed to have all of your clinical rotations at the hospital local to your city? No, that does not, but it does mean that you will be able to take most, if not all, of your rotations somewhere in Australia. Many students do take them, the majority of their rotations, if not all of their rotations, in their home state, excluding their rotation that they take within Samoa. So there was some questions about working during the preclinical and clinical phases. So for students, we have some students that work during university and we have other students that do not. So for students that work during university, we ask them when you first start to not work at all and then build your hours back up. So some students work more hours than others. It really just depends on your study plan, which is something that you fill out as part of the application process. And it's something that changes over time as your circumstances change. You may need to have more or fewer study hours in your study plan, depending on the med-sci system that you're in the preclinical phase. Some people are really great with the cardiovascular system and need fewer hours for that. And other people are like, the cardiovascular system is like a completely foreign language to me and I need some additional hours. So I would encourage those of you who are planning to work during your preclinical phase to speak with our existing students who have had work during the preclinical phase, just to kind of say, oh, this is how I did it, or this is how I adjusted myself over time, because there's no one way to do it. The majority of our students do not work during the clinical phase, and this is because the hours that you're required to be on site for rotation are just not conducive for most people to hold down the employment that they had during the preclinical phase. So we do discourage students from working during the clinical phase and from starting with a minimal or zero number of hours when they first start in the preclinical phase and going up as they see fit. Ms. Shanda, can you tell me, are there any questions in the chat that maybe I missed that we should address? Oh, I see one. Katie wants to know, do we have any rotations that address rural healthcare? Absolutely, we do. I love that Katie answered this question because I really want, my secret wish is for all students to have placements in rural health centers, and for those who have that calling to be general practitioners in rural care. So we have a number of students who do placements in rural Australia, in rural Canada, in the rural United States. Samoa, we would consider a rural and remote rotation as well. So we do have rotations that are specific to rural healthcare where you'll get that experience. And many of our students will do like urban ones, they'll do suburban rotations and rural rotations as well to kind of get a very well-rounded experience. In terms of rotations overall, what I will say is, because we always get questions like, oh, do we have rotations in a particular state, in a particular city, in a particular country? So we do have established rotations and clinical placements throughout OUM's jurisdictions. We also allow for our students, if they have existing connections or if they would like to rotate at a particular hospital, our deans do work with hospitals to identify rotations and create placements for students who are in that type of situation. So even though I said at the beginning, like not all your rotations are gonna be all at this local hospital in your area, we definitely have had students who have sought placements at their local hospital where we didn't currently have OUM students rotating, but they wanted to rotate at that hospital. They worked with their dean to set up a placement agreement and they were able to rotate there. What I will say is we have specific policies and procedures for doing that. So we don't allow students to just like go in and flyer out to hospitals. If you, the way that works is if you would like to rotate in a particular hospital, once you are admitted into university, you would contact your dean and let them know about that specific placement, and the dean will work with you and the hospital to see if agreements can be placed. We do have accreditation requirements where we have to do things like safety reviews and stuff, so we can't just rubber stamp everywhere, but just wanted to let you know that is a possibility. Sandra wanted to know how soon do students get matched after the program? So Sandra might be talking about the match, which is the placement service in the United States, or CARMS, which is the placement service in Canada, or the getting placements as a junior medical officer in Australia. So in Australia, students, once they graduate, once they've completed all their clinical rotations, they take what's called our OSCE, the Objective Structured Clinical Exam, which is a live exam with patient actors, where you actually have clinical scenarios. And they also take our FCE, our final clinical exam, which is a multiple choice exam, which is similar to the AMC exam. So Australian-based students take AMC 1 and 2 to be eligible for placements in Australia. So it generally takes a few months after graduation for students to be eligible for positions in Australia. For US-based students, they are typically taking the USMLE Step 2 after their completion of their core rotations and before their elective rotations. So they have all of their requirements for the match completed by the time of graduation. And we have students going into the match right after they graduate, and the same with CARMS as well. For our students in Samoa, after they graduate, they can go right into practice, and many of them are also placed at the TTM hospital. Okay, so that's a little bit about OUM's curriculum. I'm going to see if there is there was a question that Regina had about the hybrid program. So in the preclinical phase, all of your classes are online. So you have the curriculum has recorded videos and live classes that are offered via Zoom, pretty similar to the format that we're in now. In the clinical transition units that are in the transition phase, your classes are also offered online. The course content is recorded, and then you have weekly contact with a cohort of students as well as with your instructor. And then in the clinical phase, at the end of the clinical transition unit, there is a live week to practice clinical skills and do your clinical skills examination. And then the clinical phase is live with support online for some of the content that you might need to support your clinical examinations. So kind of think of the preclinical phase as being majority online. The clinical transition unit has a week of in-person, and the clinical phase is all in-person. Okay, so that's Amanda's question about the transitional phase being remote as well. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide, but I'm going to continue to try to answer as many questions as we can in the chat about kind of what it looks like what's the day in a life of a student at OUM. So here's what a day might look like for a student in the preclinical curriculum, and this might be helpful to those of you who are writing up your study plan as part of your admissions process. So sleep is the most important thing that you can be doing every day because medical school is not a sprint where you're just grabbing all of the information as you run by it, but rather it's an ultra marathon where you need to take in a high volume of information, but you also have to synthesize and connect all of that information. So we do recommend that our students sleep 8 hours a day. We recommend that they continue to eat meals regularly that are healthy, continue to exercise, continue to be the person that they are when they enter medical school, including their making time for their hobbies and interests, serving their community, being part of their family. Beyond that, we also recommend that students treat school as if it were a full-time job. So they create space in their day for about 8 hours of study or class time. Our classes in the preclinical period are offered live twice a day. So on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. in North America and Tuesdays at, 8 p.m. Eastern Time in North America and Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. There is a live workshop. On Wednesdays at 8 p.m., there is a case discussion. And on Thursdays in general principles, there is a lecture chat. And in the other medical science courses, there's a problem-based learning. On Thursday of the week before class, you get a set of recorded lectures that have all the information that you need to learn and prepare to come to class on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you're always kind of working on these week-long chunks when you're in the preclinical period. All of our classes run between 6 and 12 weeks, and all the preclinical classes have 2 weeks in between them to kind of give yourself a break, and also for any students that are taking deferred or resit exams. We recommend that all students, when they're planning that 8 hours of study, that when you study, it's not just you like listening to a lecture or reading a book. We highly recommend that your study is active, that you're planning your content, that you're doing it in blocks, that you're asking yourself questions all the time, that you're summarizing things in your own words. And if you want to know some more of those strategies, we really encourage you to come to our study skills for student success sessions that we hold before orientation. We really like our students to hit the ground running, and we want you to know that we know you are each individuals with your own style and way of doing things, but the way that you're going to end up doing things in medical school, if you speak to any students, they'll tell you it's not what they thought. The way that they studied before changed immensely when they entered medical school, and we want to make sure that you kind of give yourself the time, grace, and space to be able to do that. So that's a little bit of what a day in the life looks like. All right, I want to talk a little bit about our student ambassadors and our other student support programs, but I want to make sure that we're also getting to any pertinent questions in the chat and Q&A. Shanda, there was a question about Jennifer wanted to know about applicants and acceptance rates. Is there any data you can share about application numbers and acceptance rates?
So we have small cohorts. I assume we're talking about the admissions process. So if you go through the admissions process, you were successful at your interviews and you are offered a place, you can accept that place. We don't have any quotas. And our last intake for January was 55 students, 55 new students joined us in January. So that kind of gives you an idea of the cohorts. But at the moment, we don't have any quotas. So if you are offered a place, you can accept your place.
Okay, Paul wanted to know about what time zone the classes are in. So it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 8 to 10 p.m. North American Eastern Standard Time. And we have 2 classes a day. So we also have a class that is offered Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 8 to 10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is Shanda's time, Brisbane time. And sometimes that time coincides with Sydney and Melbourne, and sometimes it does not.
Yes. We
So
don't have daylight savings.
yeah, so our classes run on Brisbane time and on New York time. So that means that if you were in North America, you might choose to go to class from 8 to 10 p.m. Or if you were in New York, you might choose to go to class from 8 to 10 p.m. at night, or you might choose to go to class from 6 to 8 in the morning. And if you are in Brisbane, you might choose to go to class from 8 to 10 p.m. at night, or from about 11 until 1 sometimes in the 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. and sometimes it's 10 a.m. until noon. So
It's also the next day. So it's Wednesday,
next day.
Thursday, Friday.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So whenever we kind of talk about the times in our webinars, it gets very confusing. But as you become more and more acclimated to the OUM community, you'll start to pick up on our vernacular. Like when you see our dates, you'll always see first date / second date. And we're talking about North American / Australia, New Zealand, Samoa date, and the time zones as well. So do you have to keep that all straight in your head right now? Absolutely not. Will you figure it out and find the times that work best for you? Absolutely, yes. All right. Ramisa wanted to know, I was reading an OUM guide in 2020 that said there are options for part-time studies during preclinical, but we cannot disengage for more than 6 months in any calendar year. May I confirm if this mode of studying is still available or if we are required to take full-time preclinical in 2025 onwards? So all students at OUM are full-time students. We do offer, after a certain number, I think it's after general principles, is completed, if you do need to take a leave of absence. Some students need to take a leave for of a class off for work, or they have a personal commitment, or something happens that was unexpected that they need to deal with. So we do allow for students to take up to 12 months consecutive or non-consecutive in leave of absence. And during the leave of absence, they don't take any classes. They're not responsible for any examinations. They're not doing any research, and they're not paying any tuition and fees during that time period. Let's see. Donna wants to know, are there exams every week during the preclinical phase? So in our general principles and medical sciences courses, we do have weekly quizzes, but they are non-graded. They are quizzes that give you an opportunity to kind of test your studying against the level of questions that you might find on our exams. And the way that most of them work is similar to, like, if you're looking at questions online, where it gives you the question and the answer choices, and once you choose something, it tells you, oh, this answer is correct and this is why, or this answer is incorrect and this is why. So those are the quizzes that we have that are available weekly. All of the medical science courses also have 4 exams. There's a multiple choice question exam, which is a first short exam to kind of give you a checkpoint. It happens really early on in the course. The second is a midterm. The third is an oral assessment, and then a final exam. So those exams happen, they're spread kind of, what is the word that I'm looking for? They're spread equally across the course, but it depends on the length of the course when those exams occur. So once you're enrolled in a course, which happens 2 weeks before the start, you're given a syllabus that has all your exam dates, what kind of questions are going to be on those exams, what weeks are going to be covered, when the examination is, so on and so forth. And usually the course directors will come in and provide some messaging in the course before if students want to know exam dates for things like travel and that sort of thing. All right. Okay, so Regina says, I would like to connect with nurse practitioners from the US who are currently in the program. Thank you. And I bet some others of you might like to connect with students as well. So actually, I'm going to launch another poll, and you can tell me, let me see if I can do it. If you are interested in speaking with a medical, oh, I have to stop sharing this one. Okay, you can tell me, are you interested in speaking with an OUM student about their medical student experience? Okay, so far we have 91% that are saying yes, they're interested to speak with an OUM student about their medical student experience. So this is something that we've heard from our prospective students, and from our students said this is something that's really helpful to them when they were trying to make their decisions about admissions. So because of that, we created a program called the Student Ambassadors. And these are students who are located in different areas that OUM serve. So we have students in the United States, in Samoa, in New Zealand, in Canada, and in various Australian states. And we also have students who are at the preclinical and clinical phase of the program. So all of these students, you can connect with them to ask them about their experience at OUM. The one thing that we ask you to do is, before connecting with a student ambassador, is to connect with an admissions counselor. So if you've never connected with an admissions counselor, that's something that you should do first before connecting with a student. And the reason for that is that the admission counselor has like the full scope of information that can help you with your particular situation, where a student ambassador can simply tell you kind of what their experience is. So we definitely encourage you to reach out to the student ambassadors at any time point on your admissions journey, but do also reach out to your admissions counselor. And again, you can do that by filling out the form to get some more information on our website. We want students to be well informed during the prospective student stage, and the student ambassadors also support our new students as they're entering in an orientation and in general principles as well. We have a number of other student support programs as well. We have a peer support program that ensures students have access to non-medical, non-clinical support for any concerns they have with mental health and well-being. The students in our peer support program are all OUM students who have training enabling them to support students. And so we encourage students to reach out whenever they need. It's a confidential, non-judgmental service. We also have a number of advising services, including our student success advising, which helps with study skills, and our research advising program. So not to fear if you've never done research before, and now you have a research requirement in medical school. We have research advisors along with a dean for research that helps support you. OUM has a student association that's affiliated with AMSA, and that's the voice for advocacy, support, and information sharing amongst our students. You can email them if you have any questions or want to know a little bit more about student life. And finally, but not exclusively, we have an accommodation, equity, and inclusion planning service for any students with medical need, disability, or who have significant caregiving responsibility for an individual with medical or disability needs. And you can feel free to reach out to those services if you have any questions about them. Now you don't have to be a student to reach out to those. All right, we've reached the Q&A period, so we're going to take some of the questions that we've received in the webinar chat, and we have a couple of students who have raised their hands as well. So while I look in the chat and Q&A, I'm also going to call upon some students who have raised their hands. So Amanda, I see you have a question and would like to speak, so I'm going to allow you to talk now, and please go ahead.
All right. Hi, thank you. I was wondering, because I'm just trying to, I've actually been looking at this program for years. I'm a family practice nurse practitioner in the United States, and I'm trying to kind of, before I dive in too much, kind of look to see, you know, how I can do this and not miss like really important parts of my kids' ages and stuff. Because I kind of have kids spread out. So I was wondering, with that said, I was wondering if like the not the preclinicals, so the 3 years that's remote, that's great. When you go into clinical rotations, is it like clinical after clinical after clinical, or do you have a break in between, or can you do that process a little bit slower if you wanted? Like because I've looked through the whole website before this just so I could be able to ask questions. But I see that like certain clinicals are like 4 weeks long, 8 weeks long. Can you decide like, okay, I want to do a group of clinicals now and then take a little bit of time before my next clinicals, or is it like just full blown nonstop?
It is students, we have a policy and it's also student specific. So what I would say is how we have it set up currently is that students take a clinical rotation and then they have 2 weeks off and then they take another clinical rotation. We're also starting to allow students to not have a 2-week break between clinical rotations. We have some students who want to knock everything out of the park as quickly as possible. So we allow students to do that. We also have students who have longer than 2 weeks in between their rotations, either because they would their next rotation that they would like to have next or that's next available just is a bit further off. We have students who take if they really need like a concerted piece of time off for a specific event. We do allow students to take a leave. So students can say, I'd like to take a 2-month leave from my clinical rotations. They just click a button that's called Request LOA. They give some rationale why they would take that leave, as long as they have at least 2 months left in their leave balance of 12 months, then they're able to take a leave for a certain period of time. So one of the things that Shanda and I haven't really mentioned, but we really pride ourselves on is that we're a fairly small university. And so Shanda and I pretty much talk to every single student that enters the university before entry, upon entry, and then throughout their medical student journey as well. And so because we're a smaller university, we also really pride ourselves in being able to support students as individuals according to their need. So we could definitely have a further conversation. I would suggest you talk a little bit further with your admissions counselor, Amanda, and you can also speak with some of our students as well. But what I would say is we have a pretty good track record of just being able to support students at their needs within our policies. And then we even have a process if students want an exception to our policy. So that's my long-winded answer to your question, Amanda.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. So potentially you could, if you have enough leave balance, you could make it to where it took 3 years to finish your clinicals instead of 2. I'm trying to do clinicals where I finish after my son graduates high school. So I'm not trying to find a residency or something while he's still in high school, because I really want this, but I don't want to sacrifice my children's, that were from a rural area too, and they've been at the same school at the same kids for, from the beginning. So that's my thing, is I was trying to see if I could space it out to where it would take me a little bit more time to finish clinicals.
So possible, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thanks, Amanda. I see Chukwu, you have a question. Would you like to take the microphone?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I'm calling from Australia. So my question is, I have a couple of questions. One is about clinicals and the other one is about Australian system. So for the clinical rotation, is it every day? I just want a little insight about it. Then secondly, for Australian system, you know that medicine in Australia is very challenging. Like I've had a lot of friends that has been taking this AMC exam for a long time now. I want to ask, what is the success rates for people that take AMC from your school? And again, I stay in Canberra, ACT. Canberra is a very small place, and we don't have so many hospitals here. What is the chance of getting a place of clinicals here in Canberra? Because apart from Canberra, that means it would be Sydney, and Sydney from Canberra is like 3 hours from here. For someone that have kids, it will mean like changing of my lifestyle and everything. Thank you.
Okay, so I can't answer like specifically, there's like this percentage chance of having your rotation in Canberra or having your rotation in a specific site. What I can tell you is that we have a brand new position who's Dr. Chris May, who is our director for clinical training specifically in Australia. And so his job is specifically to say, okay, where are our students? Where do they need clinical rotations? Which ones are needed? And let's get those set up. So the university is kind of constantly and consistently working with our student population and figuring out where rotations are needed, and then getting those. So for someone who would be starting in July 2025, that means you would be starting clinical rotations in 2 to 2.5 years. So I can't answer now for you if you would have like the site in Canberra, but what I can say is it's definitely something that is possible and is what OUM is kind of looking at. We do have students who had rotations in Canberra. You have to remind me the first question again. Sorry about that. Remind me your first one.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, the
Yeah, can you
AMC.
hear me?
IMC. I think someone else asked this in the chat window as well. So the Australian Medical Council doesn't give us a report or like our students that have passed the AMC. So instead, our students come back and they say, I passed the AMC. So we have a really good success rate in terms of our students coming back and passing the AMC. We do have students who've had to take the AMC more than once. Those were students in our prior program. We've kind of revamped our program now to be a little bit more comprehensive. We also had a number of students who, because of the pandemic, did the majority of their rotations in Samoa when there were medical students were not allowed to be on clinical rotation in Australia. And so those students had a little bit more trouble with the AMC than our more current students. So I don't have a number for you for the AMC success rate. What I do know is that our students are reporting back to us that they're passing the AMC, and we also get our emails from students about where their placements are. I read a lot of recommendation letters for our Australian students who are applying to junior medical officer positions and so on and so forth. And a lot of students are asked to apply for positions in hospitals that they've rotated in. And because OUM students rotate in multiple hospitals, that means they're being asked to apply for multiple positions. So we do overall have a really good placement rate. I don't know if we have any. I think we were collecting those data for a little while, but I don't know if we have our recent rate of our placement situation. No, okay.
No, we don't, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, but
All right. All right, thank you. Please, just one more question. Yeah, one more question before I drop. I just want to ask, assuming you are not able to travel to Samoa, is there any other option, or like, do you get my question? Maybe something happened and you're not able to do your rotation in Samoa. Is there any other option, or is Samoa like the only option?
So what I will say is that all prospective students should plan to have at least 1 4-week rotation in Samoa. And you should have, a few years in advance to plan for that. So everyone should plan to do that. Have we had students who've asked for an exception to that policy and been granted an alternative? Yes, we have. So that's on a student-specific, situation-specific basis. But we do ask all students to plan to ensure that they are making time and space and funding, etc., for their rotation in Samoa.
Yeah, so if you ask for exception, what would be the next option for you? I'm not trying to ask for exception. I'm just asking a general question, just to be clear in everything. Yeah, so if you ask for exception, maybe that you don't want to go to Samoa, what would be your next option?
Okay, so what I can tell you is that for all accredited medical schools, you have a certain number of clinical hours and placements that you have to take. So just because you can't go to Samoa doesn't mean that you know that 4 weeks gets erased. So everyone still has to complete those 72 weeks. And I can give you an example in the past. So during the pandemic, when there were travel restrictions, some students weren't able to travel to Samoa. And so an exception was given where they wrote a Samoan literature review as an alternative and ensured that they also completed those clinical hours elsewhere. So that's one example of an exception to policy.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Katie wanted to know, do we need to make housing arrangements for Samoa rotations? We do have an office at TTM Hospital in Samoa. And our lovely officer, Ms. Moretta Reddy and Ms. Veronica Wong, work in that office, and they support students from the start of planning for their summer rotations. So they're the ones that are going to support you, like, hey, here's where housing is available. Here's how to get a cab from the airport. Like, these are some of the like, here's some words that you need to know before you come to Samoa. So we have a whole office that supports our students traveling to Samoa. So yes, you will need to have housing arrangements, but we have support services available for that. Mesh wants to know, does OUM have a LinkedIn for student alumni? OUM does have a LinkedIn, and most of our alumni are connected through OUM. So if you go, we do still have our LinkedIn, right, Shanda? Last time you were giving me a face like, oh no. Okay, so I know I'm connected to them in LinkedIn. So if you go to the OUM LinkedIn page, you'll be able to see the contacts that are on that page. Also, you could, Shanda and I are also, friends with alumni, so if you want connections through us. We also have the OUM AA, the OUM Alumni Association. So if you're interested to talk one-on-one to an alum, you can feel free to email oumaa@oum.edu.ws. I want to be conscious of time. We're going a little bit over, but I'm okay with it. Shanda, are you okay with it?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. I want to just keep answering questions, but if you're someone that needs to go, this session is being recorded, and feel free to come back when you have a little bit more time to hear the rest of our discussion. Okay, I see that Erica and Saif have their hands raised. So Erica's just coming up first on the list. So I'm going to give you the mic first, Erica. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have 3 questions. One is, do you have a document for requirements for a possible clerkship site that we might need so we can start looking? So if we would like to stay close to our home as opposed to going elsewhere, just so we can kind of get an idea. That's one thing. Is there a way to not take a year after the preclinical during the testing year? I'm a U.S. student. I'd be a U.S. student. To take as long to finish that portion. And then as far as tuition is concerned, what's the tuition when we're doing clerkship? I had asked that in the chat, so.
Okay, thanks, Erica. I wrote yours down because I didn't want to get in the same situation
Okay.
that was in before. Okay, so your first was about requirements for the clerkship site. Is there a document? So those documents and process is dealt with through the dean's office.
Okay.
So Shanda, are you Erica's admissions officer or is it Camille?
It will be Camille.
Okay, Erica, have you had any contact with our admissions office yet?
Yes, in the past, but I don't think I spoke with Camille.
Okay, so we'll have Camille reach out to you and see if she can
Okay.
get some of connect you with the dean's office for that documentation.
Okay, thank
Um,
you.
And I see we have a couple of other US students, and if you want similar information, and you've already connected with Camille, just let her know. And then you also wanted to know if it was possible to not take a year after preclinicals for the USMLE prep, I think is what you mean.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so currently in the transition unit for students in the USMLE pathway, the USMLE prep course lasts for up to 6 months. Some students take even longer. We have had a program redesign in the past couple of years where students are getting a much higher amount and level of content that is USMLE specific. So we do expect that number to go down. So the way to not take a year after preclinicals is to really have a focused effort in your preclinical period when you're actually in the course on learning and retaining that material. One recommendation that I would have for you, Erica, or anyone else that kind of wants to go this route is to subscribe for the NBME subject examinations and take those
Okay.
practice exams during and after your preclinical courses. So take the cardiovascular like subject exam, maybe even at the beginning and end of cardiovascular system to kind of gauge where you're at and use those as your benchmarks. Things like that will help you to kind of reduce your period. The one thing that will help you do that as quickly as possible is to pass the USMLE, the NBME, which is kind of the practice exam, and then take and pass your USMLE step 1. So the quicker that you can do that, the quicker that prep period is.
Can I clarify right quick? So at the end of each, like cardiovascular and GI, we don't have to do the NBME.
It's not a course requirement, but
Okay.
if
Okay.
you are a USMLE pathway student and you're
Yes.
looking to optimize your time in the preclinicals and shave some time off the end, we would recommend using the
Okay.
NBME subject exams, because the NBME is the National Board of Medical Examiners, for those who aren't familiar with that pathway. And they're the ones that write the USMLE step exams, so they're creating the level and content that you need for those exams.
Right. Okay.
Just. And then tuition, what is the tuition during the clinical period? I can't answer that because I just don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but what I would recommend is there is a tuition page now on the website, or no?
Yes, and very detailed.
Okay, a very detailed page that tells you in your currency, like what the tuition credits and the number of credits in preclinical and the number of credits in clinical. So you can go on there and see what's the amount in US for preclinical and for clinical credits and how many do I need in each. And then note that that is the current cost, and that tuition goes up like at other universities with the consumer price index, and that's how we do it too. So the only way to avoid increases in CPI is what Shanda mentioned at the beginning, is paying for your credits in that year. So you can purchase as many credits as you want in 2025 at the 2025 price. And then in 2026, you have the CPI indexed price for tuition. So I think I'm even starting to boggle my own mind. I really recommend having a look at that page and then coming to our financial information services webinar, which is on February 6th, if you are in North America, and February 7th, if you are in Australia, Samoa, or New Zealand, and it's at the same time as this webinar. So whatever time you entered this webinar today is the same time for that particular webinar.
Okay, and then one more thing. Would Camille have a list of like the current sites or clinical places where students currently are that, sites that have been approved in the United States, just so like we can see maybe if we have family there that can kind of offset some of our costs. Or like I have a home in another state that I could be living in instead of I live on the other side, I live on the opposite coast. So things like that. Is there like a list or have you all considered putting, because most schools have their approved sites listed on their site. And I noticed that unless you all have updated it, there's none listed.
Shanda, do you have the answer to
Yes, so no, we don't have a list because we are a small Samoan institution. Our clinical sites change all the time. For the US, we say that our clinical site is in Chicago. And if you want
Okay.
a site outside of that, you need to talk to the Dean of North America to see if
Okay.
you can arrange one closer to home. But it may
Okay.
or may not be possible. But Chicago is our
Okay.
primary site.
Okay, Saeed, you have your hand down, but I'm just gonna give you the mic in case you still have a question.
Thank you. And most of my questions were answered by the previous speaker, but perhaps since I have the mic, I'll take advantage and ask, are there requirements when it comes to the clinical rotation to clinical sites? Meaning, could one alternate from a medical center to a community hospital to a clinic, depending on the rotation itself? And that's one. And two, if someone works in a hospital or a medical center, are they able to, if they're successful in securing a rotation, would that be permissible?
I think I understand what you're asking, which is like basically, can you split a clinical rotation across different sites and different types of sites?
Not one rotation, but rotations in general.
Rotations in general. Yes, you can. So for instance, like some students will do their community and family medicine rotation at like a small GP practice, like in outside Cairns here in Australia, or maybe like in rural Arkansas. And then they might go to the Chicago site, which is an urban site, for their internal medicine rotation. Similarly, we have students who also split their rotation. So for instance, we have some students, psych rotation is 8 weeks. So we have some students who do 4 weeks of psych rotation at a suburban hospital near their home and the other 4 weeks in Samoa. So yes, it's possible to do different rotations at different sites, and even within the same rotation, you can split it across different sites as well. Ankit wanted to know, are there any additional online classes, lectures, along with clinical rotations during the clinical years? So each clinical rotation, you have your on-site, I think, Chukwu, one of your questions that I missed was like, what is the schedule for clinical rotations? So they're Monday to Friday during typical business hours. So are there any online classes or lectures along with those? So all of the core clinical rotations do have an online class associated with them. So they have like some chapters to read, sometimes some recorded lectures, sometimes some slide decks, and then those practice quizzes associated with them. And they all have a final exam at the end as well. So there are additional resources to your clinical rotation to make sure that you have exposure to all the different types of cases that are relevant to that rotation. And that is to ensure that you have a good grounding for your AMC 1 and 2. If you're in Australia, for your NZ-REX, if you are in Aotearoa, New Zealand, for your NAC and MCC-QE, if you are in Canada, and for your USMLE Step 2, if you're in the United States. Okay. Shanda, have I missed any questions? What would you like to pull up?
There was a question from Paul asking if he can take his family to Samoa.
Absolutely, we do have, we have had other students who have brought their family to Samoa with them and have had wonderful experiences there. So it does take a little bit of extra planning. I would recommend connecting in, once you get started, connecting in with our Samoa office for any additional things they might recommend at your planning phase. Our Samoan office does things like take care of your visas for work and that sort of thing. And then if you're bringing family members, they'll have some additional recommendations for you to ensure you have a smooth travel and smooth visit. Ashley wanted to know about accreditation for Canadian provinces. So I don't see your exact question, Ashley, sorry about that, but it's probably, are we accredited in different provinces in Canada? Oh, yes. Is this university accredited in all provinces in Canada? As in, could I get a job in any province afterward? So the way that the CARMS, which is the Canadian Residency Matching Service, works is that each province has their own set of specifications for the things that you need before you're eligible to apply for residencies in that province. All of them have a requirement that the university that the medical degree is from is approved by the LMCC, the Licentiate for Canadian College of Medicine, the Licentiate for Medical Colleges of Canada, and have to be schools listed in the World Directory for Medical Education. So yes, students from OUM are eligible for applications in CARMS. And in addition to graduation from OUM, they have to take the MCCQE and NAC, and then some provinces have additional requirements. I'm just going to amend my statement quickly to say that I don't believe that Quebec would be included in that because we don't have any French language instruction within our curriculum. I would have to double check that, but I'm gonna leave Quebec off that list for now. Shanda, have I missed any other questions? Have we missed any other questions?
Jennifer wanted to know about the graduates for the last 10 years, but I don't have that sort of numbers in front of me. I did try and have a look, but I don't have those kind of numbers at the moment.
I don't know the number of graduates.
It's something we can get Camille to get back to you on.
I mean, I can tell you I can give you the number of like our incoming classes. So our last, actually, it's 53, right? For our January 2025 cohort?
55, including
55.
the transfers.
55, okay. And I think that was our largest class.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, I'm not sure yet about July 2025. Maybe you all will be the largest class with 55. All right. And we do have graduation ceremonies in North America and in Australia and in Samoa. We haven't had a Samoan-based graduation ceremony in a little while, but we have had them in the past. All right. I think we'll just end for now and give you some next steps for application. Shanda, take it away.
All right. So application deadlines, as I said, 1st of March for July, really important. Don't miss this deadline or you will not be considered for July if that's your intention. The other application deadline is the 1st of September for January. And as I said, I'll repeat this again, we don't accept late or incomplete applications, so get on to it, please. Acceptance deadline. So if you are offered a place, you have an acceptance deadline. We have to get all of your post-acceptance documents to us and pay the intake fee. Unfortunately, you can't pay the intake fee in a payment plan or anything like that. It has to be paid up front. So the acceptance deadline is the 1st of June for July and the 1st of December for January. And then we have orientation week, which is, as Nicolette pointed out earlier, the dates. So the 24th to the 27th is for the North American cohort, and the 25th to the 28th is the Australia, New Zealand and Samoan cohort. And that's in June. And then we also have the orientation dates for January 2026 if you are considering applying for that intake.
Those are hot off the presses.
Yes. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So, we want to encourage all of you, and I know that there were some questions about finances, to join us on February 6th in North America and February 7th in Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Samoa for our financial information session. In March to meet our student ambassadors live, in April to meet OUM graduates from North America, and in May to meet OUM graduates from Australia, New Zealand, and Samoa. So Fafatai Lava, thank you everyone for joining us today. And for those of you who joined us for the extra long session today, we encourage all of you to continue to gather information if you're still at that stage, to get your application started or completed at that stage, and to reach out to your admissions counselor wherever you're at if you have any questions. If you haven't had the pleasure of speaking with Shanda or Camille Moretta yet, I want to encourage you to go to the website and fill out the form for more information. They will contact you as soon as possible, and make sure that all your questions are answered. And if Ms. Shanda and I didn't get to your question, just because we had so much engagement today, which we're very grateful for, it's not because it's not important to us, and it's not because we don't want to answer it. We just simply didn't get to that. So I do encourage you to, again, just reach out to your admissions counselors. We'll also provide our Q&A back into our admissions office to ensure that you get answers to your questions and have the info you need for your decision making. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being part of the OUM community, and we look forward to perhaps welcoming you into our next class in July 2025.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
for joining us.